Welcome to the Level Up Your Band podcast, episode 30. Hello, and welcome back to the Level Up Your Band podcast. My name is Gavin Patterson, and I'm here with Julian Pombo.
Hey, how's it going?
Not bad. How are you this week?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty chipper. A bit annoyed about. I'm because I live in Glasgow. I'm in local lockdown, so that's fun. I can't see anybody for 2 weeks.
Yeah,
because people have been,
as of yesterday,
having house parties and things like that. So that's fun.
You can go to a pub and you can get your hair cut and you can go to the shops, but you can't go to your friend's house.
Aye.
I think that's the current
makes perfect
situation.
sense. I didn't know you could still go to pubs. That's a new one.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah.
I haven't really paid much attention because I don't leave the house anyway. Yeah, I just did a Tommy Wiseau laugh.
Yeah, man.
Room reference. Anyway.
Yeah.
So
greatest
today,
film ever made.
This is probably your most anticipated episode. You're probably more excited about this episode than any other episode.
This is
the base one.
I feel like I'm in my. I really feel it in my element just now. So yeah. So last week we talked about drums. So the one basically starting from the very foundation of the band. So now we're moving up to arguably basically the second most important instrument besides drums for keeping time and keeping the band together, which is the bass. So I'll be just the same as last week. We'll just be going through what to look for in an instrument, how to look after it, setting it up, playing it, all that kind of stuff. So we'll start with choosing an instrument. So it's a little bit different from drums in a sense that there's only really 3 types of instruments. So there's one of the first things that you need to consider is size, and you have basically 3 options, and it's more or less like you're going shopping for clothes. You have your small, you have your medium, and you have your large. I don't have a medium scale bass to show you, but I have a short scale bass and a long scale bass. So here's an example of a short scale. I don't know if you can see all of that, but short scale bass tends to be roughly around 30 inches in length. So that's the length from where the string starts at the bridge all the way to the nut here. This one is a little smaller than that. It's about 27 inches, but 30 is usually the more common kind of size. And there's different reasons that you can get into for choosing these different sizes, because they all have their own unique sounds and unique pros and cons and things like that. So there's an example of a short scale bass and an example
is the Hofner a medium?
Yeah, I guess it. Well, no, because medium scale is about 32 inches. Your Hofner is about 30-inch scale.
Where's the camera?
Yeah, one of those. So there's another example of a short scale.
You recognise this from said
instrument. And funnily enough, both instruments that we showed on there are German brands. So I don't know. It's just something about Germany just making small basses.
Great podcast material showing to the microphone. Watch on YouTube, please.
I know,
if you want
right?
to see
I'm
us
just showing. So then
this.
you have watch this on YouTube because it's really important. So this is obviously it's getting blocked, but some of it's getting blocked by the mic. But this is your typical bass guitar that, run-of-the-mill bass guitar that you'll find, your long scale. Like 90% of bass guitars that you'll find will be this scale length, which is around 34 inches. So you're like, cool, all right, cool. So there's different sizes. So what does that...
Yeah.
How does that impact me? It's two things. If you're small, you might want to play a smaller instrument.
Right.
It seems a bit obvious, but just something to think about. Because bass guitars are quite big, and you might struggle. If you have particularly, if you're got short arms or whatever, small hands, you might actually struggle with a long scale bass.
So Donald Trump would be better with a short scale because of his small hands.
Yeah, probably. No, he's got big hands, like the biggest hands you've ever seen. So there's that practical aspect to it. The other aspect to it is that it does affect the sound. So short scale basses, the bass fundamental, so as in like the actual bass note is a lot stronger in a short scale bass than it is in a long scale bass. But the thing is that the sustain on a short scale bass tends to be a little bit shorter. So your notes are a little bit more the attack on them is very much like boom, like it's there and then it's gone. Yeah. Whereas on a long scale bass, you can play one note and it lasts for
Is that
for
because
days,
of the string
basically.
tension?
And they're exactly. So like strings on a short scale bass tend to be a little looser, a little floppier. And just because of the string's a lot longer, basically there's more room for the other, harmonics to sort of ring out, which just gives the bass note a little bit, the string just a little bit more life.
Yep.
So a couple of things to think about. Generally, I would say that if you're buying a bass guitar for the first time and you're just an average Joe like me, 5'11", just run of the mill, then get a long scale bass and start with that. If you're looking for sizes.
I've got a question.
Yeah. So
something you've not got written here actually.
Yeah.
My wee Hofner bass is a hollow body bass.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Yeah, most bass guitars you would see are solid bodies, like my Strat.
Yeah, actually, all the ones I've shown you so far are all solid body.
Here's an example, podcast people, of a solid body. Okay, that was solid. Now, hollow. This is my Hofner hollow. It's a hollow boy. So what is the... Other than the Hofner weighs about the same as 5 feathers, other than weight, what is the point in having a hollow body or solid body bass?
Well, it depends on who you ask, because I kind of have this written down later on when I'm going to talk about tone woods and things like that, and it kind of applies to the same kind of thing. Some people say that hollow-bodied basses sound a little woodier, if that makes sense. Sound a little more acoustic. I don't know
honkier.
how else to describe it. Yeah. They have something else to them. Personally, I've not played enough hollow-bodied basses to really notice that. Mm-hmm. Because in my experience, most of the sound, the thing that affects the sound is going to be the pickups. That's. So
basically, hollow body meaning that there's a like an acoustic guitar, there's a chamber inside the body.
There's a chamber inside, yeah.
Whereas a solid body Strat or something else is just a solid block of wood. So it creates
totally
like
depends.
resonance and all this stuff.
At the end of the day, it does come down to aesthetics as well. If you like the look of a hollow body bass guitar, then go for it. But personally, I've not noticed much of a difference. But that's just because I've not owned that many and I've not played that many. But talking about sounds, so pickups, are they important? Yeah, and no. It depends. So, I've got two basses here, for example. Actually, I've got two extremes that I can show you. So I've got a P bass, which has one pickup, right? And the control scheme on that is really, really simple, right? So it's literally just, there's the pickup there, and then you have a volume control, which makes it louder or softer, and then you have a tone control, which basically changes if there's more treble in your sound, or if you just want to cut the treble completely and just makes your bass guitar sound flatter.
What's treble?
And that's it. You're probably better at answering that than me.
Treble is
it's like the higher frequencies. Yeah.
So it's anything on a guitar. It'd probably be anything from 5,000 hertz up, probably. So so those like higher harmonics that I was talking about in the guitar and in the string, basically completely cut off. Yep.
If you take it all the way on, or you can engage them. It's up to you.
Am I right in saying that's a single coil pickup?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's right.
So single coil, meaning what?
Meaning you have one strip of magnets with like loads of copper wire wrapped around it. That's your pickup, but it's basically you just have one of those.
This one is
that's it.
An example of humbuckers.
Humbuckers.
Yeah, so you can see two. There's
that's two of those together.
There's you can see 4 lines and then 4 dots. I'm assuming that's 2 different types of pickups combined together in a formation that is doubled. It's like double singles.
So, and the reason they're called humbuckers is because the two of them basically on a single coil, it's quite prone to pick up electrical feedback and things and from the air
radio
from the room. So when you play a bass guitar with a single coil pickup, you will get quite a bit of hum depending on the room you're in. But humbuckers, basically, they have 2 single coils and they basically cancel each other out, and they just basically stop any kind of humming altogether. It's all got to do with magnets and stuff, and I've no idea. I'm just like, yep, okay. So that's one extreme, which is basically as simple as you can get.
Yeah.
The other one. Oh, hey, I just took you with me. Sorry. Let me just adjust my camera. There we go. The other extreme you can get to is this, where you have 2 humbuckers and then you have controls and you have knobs and you have things that you can flick, and it's all really interesting and weird and confusing. What I'd recommend for somebody buying their very first bass guitar is just to go as simple as possible. And then, as either with a precision bass, which is what I showed you there, with the one pickup, and the one tone control and all that, or a jazz bass, which will have 2 single coil pickups, and it's just more of the same. But really, sound wise, you're not gonna. With 2 pickups, you do get a little bit more like customization. You can change things about because you have pickups in different positions, and it'll change the way the bass guitar sounds. But generally, it's more of a matter of of taste, and you'll find these things out as you go along. But if you're like a total newbie to bass guitar, just keep it as simple as possible.
Yep.
One pickup, on and off. There you go.
Yeah.
One more. You don't need to think about anything else. So, yeah. Sometimes you can get bass guitars with 3 pickups.
Active and passive.
And sometimes Sorry?
Active and passive as well.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah. Oh, I forgot about active and passive. We'll come to that.
Yep.
So what we mean by that when we're talking about active basses and passive basses is an active bass. All the basses that I will show you today are all passive, meaning that they don't have any extra electrical components that need to be boosted by an external
I think it's
power source.
It's a real magnet
or something like that.
A passive guitar has a real magnet, whereas an active guitar has an electromagnet.
Yeah,
I think that's the only difference. And a preamp.
But with a passive with an active bass, you have more customizability options. So you have like a little preamp on your bass guitar, so you can tweak the bass and the treble and things like that on your bass.
Yeah.
But if you're playing through an amp, it's, I don't know, it's just extra. It's an extra thing to worry about, and I personally don't like the sound of them because they just sound a little bit muddy.
Yeah.
But it's up to you, because some people really pull them off. Like what's his name, John Young. You know, he plays an Ernie Ball, active bass, and he sounds great on it. So it totally depends.
Depends on the music.
Talking about how things sound, we were talking about like hollow body instruments and things like that. So like, and this kind of ties in with tone woods. So what I mean by a tone wood is that guitar companies will sometimes sell you an instrument and they'll say something along the lines of like, oh, this bass is made with swamp ash, or
what?
It's made with mahogany, and like this basically changes the way the guitar sounds. Like swamp ash sounds brighter and mahogany sounds a lot darker, and a lot of it is like just complete mumbo jumbo. It just
controversial.
It's up there with what you call it. Like it's up there with like homeopathic treatments and things like that. It's up there with like Reiki, in my opinion.
So it's the total opposite from drums then, because the woods on drums are vitally important, and something that I never even mentioned that on the last episode.
Yeah. Because the thing about a drum is that it's an acoustic instrument.
Well, exactly.
You know, you hit it, and like. It's true that certain woods resonate in different ways, but
I'll add, the reason I didn't mention it was because I like to I don't care what the wood is. If I hit the drum and I like the sound of it, I just pick that drum kit. It so happens that the kit I use is 100% maple kit. And I didn't go, I only want to try out maple kits. It was just, I went into the drum store and I went, bang, that sounds cool. Oh, it's a maple, right?
Yeah.
Next time I buy a drum kit, I now know that the drum kit I've been using for 10 years was a maple. That's the only thing I would say about that.
Aye, yeah, and to be honest, I kind of agree with you. Go in, if somebody starts talking to you about tone woods, just basically just like, yeah, okay.
La 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 la.
Yeah, just be polite, but completely ignore them. Yeah, Unless you're going in to buy an acoustic bass, an acoustic guitar or something, in which case, then yes, like the wood will make a difference. But on a bass guitar, it won't really make much of a difference. At the end of the day, it's mostly aesthetic. Like for example, I prefer, like with the exception of my German bass, which has like an ebony fretboard. All the other bass guitars that I have maple fretboards. Right. Why? Because I just like the way that maple fretboards look. That's it.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, I mean, do your own research, you know, and if you have come across evidence that tone woods do make a difference, please send it along. because I'd like to read it. But from what from my personal experience, I've not noticed any kind of difference at all. It is mostly just some woods are brighter, some woods are like lighter, and some woods are darker, and that's it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Some woods are lighter, as in like they weigh less, you know. So, and some woods are cheaper, some woods are more expensive. You know, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah. So next thing I want, brands. Yeah, that's another one to is to sort of, so now it goes with tone woods, because like it's the other thing that people will try and sell you is they'll go, buy this Swamp Ash American Fender. It's really good. It's really great. You know, you'll love it. So with brands, brands are generally a good place to start. So you're generally safer buying an instrument which is made by somebody that you have heard of 90% of the time. So buying a Fender bass, you're like, cool, okay, I know exactly what I'm getting.
Kind of.
That's fine, no problem. Kind of. Whatever. But the thing to be careful with brands is that a lot of the time when you're buying a bass that is made by one of these really old established brands like Fender or Gibson,
yep,
and in some cases a Yamaha, I guess, and Ibanez, and you know, people like that, Ernie Ball. A lot of the time you are just paying for that name, so you need to be really careful. You know, don't just go into a shop and be like, yeah, don't just go in and be like, yes, the Fender Precision bass, I want that. Do you want to try it? No, because I know it's going to be good. There's no guarantee that it's going to be a good instrument.
Yeah, don't do that.
So my advice to you would be, go in and just say to the guys in the shop, you know, I just want to try everything, you know, in this price range, and then see what sticks. You know, see what you like, you know, because you might be surprised. But if you're not sure what to go for, you know, it's a good place to start with brands like Fender, you know, Fender Squier, or some of the, you know, mid-tier Yamaha basses, which I've put in some. Actually, if you're stuck for like good instrument series to like look at, there's a list on our website that you can have a look at and you can download. So I've listed all of that in there, and you can have a look for yourself and see where to start. But that's kind of where I am on brands. I've got, like, one of my favorite basses of all time is basically just the Toman in-house brand, Harley Benton, and the bass cost me about £90, and it's an absolute beast. So, you know, nothing. You know, it cost me nothing. Whereas the other one that I showed you, the white Schecter, that cost me around £700, something like that.
Oof.
Still, but yeah, still really, really good instrument. But and I would, you know, I treat them both with the same kind of respect. I see them both as equally good instruments.
Playing George Square in Glasgow, and you brought out your wee P bass, and I think did you have the white bass that day? I think you did. You had both.
Yes.
And Eriska were playing George Square for it was the European Championships. It's like the Olympics, but crap. So we were playing the sort of the main Glasgow stage, and then we split the band in two. So we started off as a little four-piece version quartet of ourselves, like an acoustic version, and you brought on your red P bass. And if I remember correctly, the sound guy was having a bit of trouble with it, just coming across that massive, huge PA system on that stage. It was an absolutely huge stage. I mean, this was getting broadcasted to like German TV and stuff. It was like proper big affair, and he was having a bit of trouble. But when you plugged in your Schecter for later on in the Eris cassette, and it was like night and bloody day. It was like, I mean, the P bass sounded great for. I mean, it's amazing that a 90 quid bass plugged into a huge, massive PA system could still be fairly decent. But when you plugged your Schecter in, you could really hear that. It was just this massive sound.
It's a beast of a bass. It's great. I absolutely love it.
It's really when you get to those extremes that you really see your instrument come into its own. It's something that you'll not notice in a little noise rock gig with the seats or that only 60 people can go to in Glasgow in some basement. Your P bass will do just fine, but when you get to like big stadiums and stuff like that, it's perhaps that's
I mean, it
when you'll
didn't
start to
help
notice.
that I was going in through a DI box with the P bass as well. So that didn't help. Like through an amp. That bass sounds amazing. Which sounds really, really good. But so yeah, lots of things to keep in mind. Just to finish off choosing an instrument, you're going to be inundated with choices such as, should I go for 4 strings or 5 strings or 6 strings or 3 strings or 7 strings
or 11?
And with that, I say just 4 strings. If you have no idea, if this is your first time, the worst thing you could do to yourself is confuse yourself even further with like a fan-fretted, like active 6-string bass, which you're just looking at and you're like, I don't understand.
I have a story related to this. I've probably told it before.
Yes, it gets me every time.
So what? I was playing a big band gig through in Edinburgh. Can't remember where or when, but a while ago. And big band music, for those of you who don't know what that is, it's kind of jazz, later jazz, 1940s, Glenn Miller. It's kind of a really, really big jazz band playing dance music. That's basically what it is during wartime, that kind of style of music. So typically, back then, they would use a 4-string upright acoustic double bass thing. But nowadays, no one brings them together. They're very rare now. So you usually bring a wee electric bass, 4-string usually, and you get lots of different types. Some people go for hollow bodies. I've seen a couple of Hofners and those types of gigs. They sound really good with a big band. But I turned up to this gig. I usually
just play a P bass. Yeah,
and this guy turns up. Kid you not, it was a guitarist who was just depping in to play bass, and he brought a beige Gear for Music 6-string active bass to a big band gig. And one of the trombonists in that band, who's actually a really accomplished bass player, who probably should have been on bass that night, and we should have got another trombonist. But he came up to me and he was like, "Have you seen that bass? What's he doing? What's he doing with a 6-string active disgusting bass like that at this gig?" And I was like, "Oh, well, I don't know. It may be all right. And during the gig, because he thought, "Oh, I'm a guitarist, I prefer 6 strings, blah, blah, blah," he got totally swamped. He got totally swamped by it because, as you'll know, big band music is so much like improvisation and walking bass lines, and it's doom, 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 doom. All this is constant.
Yeah.
And your sight reading has to be impeccable, and just your knowledge of big band music. And his wasn't the best because he's used to reading guitar music. He's a really, really accomplished guitarist for that style of music. I've heard him; he's exceptionally good. His bass playing skills are not quite up there. So instead of going in with a 4-string and keeping it simple, he went in with this 6-string and completely sabotaged his gig to the point where he had to just stop playing halfway through the song because he just was swamped by notes and just had to stop. and he had this big 6-string in front of him. It's like learning to drive in a Bugatti or a Lamborghini. It's like you need to start with a crappy Peugeot 207.
Yeah. Or like something equally ridiculous, like learning how to drive on like a bus,
a tank, a bus.
Yeah, just something, a lorry, like something that is just completely unnecessary.
Yeah,
you know.
So that goes along.
Right.
Just keep it simple to begin. So is that keep it simple, stupid principle again? The KISS principle.
Yeah.
Keep it simple. Start simple.
And I've played 5 strings, 6 strings. I've tried them all, and the thing is that I found that just 4 strings is enough. And I've actually found that like the more strings you add to the instrument, the more uncomfortable it gets to play it, because the fretboard gets bigger and everything just gets a bit more insane. And a 4 strings is just, again, it's just simpler. It's just more intuitive.
Yeah.
So just 4 strings is enough. Maybe 3 if you feel like you only need 3. That's the thing. You can get 3-string basses.
Yeah.
You know, if you're only going to be playing on 2 of those 3 strings anyway. Something to think about. And last but not least, should you get a fretted or a fretless instrument? For the love of God, get a fretted instrument if it's your first time. Don't get a fretless instrument. Yep. However, if you do feel like trying out a fretless instrument, mate, and you're a bass player, like there's lots of cool things you can do with fretless, but I would first spend a lot of time with your fretted bass and get to know that really well.
Yeah.
And then once you get to know that really well, the transition from fretted to fretless will be pretty easy. And because like fretless instruments, fretless basses can be really useful and really, really cool and really, really fun. But
just like a violin,
just in general,
you can slide up and do all really
slide up and down.
Stuff.
It's basically you have like a mini double bass in your hand. It's pretty good fun, you know. So just spend a little bit of time on
a fretless recently, actually. I told you about it. It was a guy came in with this fretless jazz bass. So he was obviously a massive Jaco Pastorius fan. And he came in, it was maybe a couple of years ago, he came in with this thing. I'm like, oh no, fretless. I'm like, this is going to be pitchy as anything. I'm going to have to auto-tune the bass. He's never going to get this in tune. There's no way. And he was exceptional bass player. This kid, he was like 16, 17, and he's been in since. And your ear has to be right on it, because you have to be precisely where the note is on the fretboard to be in tune. And this guy's ear was insane. And he came in, the last song that band came in and did, he puts down the bass guitar, and he's like, oh, kind of want to put some sax on this song. And he goes into his car, pulls out an alto, tenor, and baritone sax and plays them all to like next level amazingness, and lays down like some alto lines, some tenor lines, and baritone lines on the song. I'm like, yeah, this guy's like a little mini genius. So if you are a mini genius, feel free to get a fretless. But if you're just a run-of-the-mill guy just trying to learn bass, get fretted.
Get fretted, and then once you feel like you've got like the fretted bass down, go for it. Get yourself a fretless bass. Try it out. See how it works, because it's worth doing. So that's bass guitars. Let's talk about strings. The most hated, the arch nemesis of bass players, apparently, according to you, just never changed their strings. So, strings, man, they're so important. They are so important. So we'll talk about, there's three types of bass strings that you can get, and I've actually got all the 3 basses that I have are all set up with those 3 strings.
Perfect.
So I can show you what they look like on the video, and if not, I'll describe them to you. So first one that you have is your round wound string. That is basically like your most common run-of-the-mill string. So, I don't know if you'll be able to see that in the camera. Basically, the string has like the way that they're sort of made is that you have like a steel core going down the middle of the string, and then a bunch of metal wrapped all the way around it, right? Which hence
run
right?
your fingernail down one.
Yeah.
The scratchy noise. Do that in the mic. You can hear.
So they sound like this.
Right.
I don't know if the mic will pick that up, right? But
Sure
you can
it will.
hear my nail sort of like scratching
scratchy
against that, right? They're great. Round strings are awesome. They're nice and bright. They're pretty versatile. Will basically work with any kind of musical genre you can think of. So great place to start, and they're super cheap as well. So round wounds, pretty good place to start. Next, you have flat wounds, and the way that they're made is practically exactly the same, except from having the ridges. Flat wounds don't have that. If there are any violin players here or anybody that plays a string instrument, it basically feels almost exactly the same as like a double bass string or
smooth.
It's just completely smooth. Yeah. And generally these kinds of strings are generally a lot more mellow, and don't have such a violent attack.
You can tell them about
joining up
the thing we did with that Framus that you're holding. Do you remember the strings we had on it to begin with, and the problems we were having with harmonics?
Oh yeah, God.
That we had rounds on it to begin with, I think, didn't you?
Yeah, but they were really crap wounds, so that's why I didn't put them on the gear list.
Oh, okay. yeah.
So for short scale instruments, you need to be really careful about the kind of strings that you're getting. You can't just go, bass strings, click, buy those, and then stick them on. You need to get short scale bass strings. It's very, very important, and same because they'll be made a specific way and they'll have a specific tension to them. So yeah, the strings that I had on this before were like roto sound short scale strings, and holy moly, like the worst strings I've ever played on in my life. Just the whole instrument was out of tune with itself. It was weird because like the fundamental note was fine, but the harmonics around it were all completely messed up.
Yep, they were out of tune and louder than the fundamental.
Yeah.
So when we were recording, we were recording a tune. So Julian would play like a D, just maybe an open D or something, and you would get a flat A harmonic, which was actually louder than the actual note you were playing. So it's basically when he played a D, it was a flat A because it was so badly set up.
It kind of sounded like this. Every time I played an A.
Yeah, or a D,
like,
yeah. Yeah, that's exactly
lovely.
what it sounded like. It was horrendous. It was horrendous. And then you got those disgusting abominations off that instrument, and you bought flat wounds for short scale, and the difference was night and day. It was like a different bass guitar. Yep,
and they're absolutely great. So flat wounds are a really good option if you're playing things like if you're playing lots of like I don't know like rhythm and blues and soul, like those kind of like older styles of music,
flat wounds
maybe
on
some
the
funk
Hofner bass. Yeah, because the round wounds on a Hofner just sound dreadful. There was round wounds were on it, and it's just horrible.
Yeah, So Yeah, generally, some instruments will respond better to certain types of strings, but flat wounds are a good option for certain types and styles of music. And then you have tape wounds, which aren't as commonly used, but I like them. So if you'll be able to see on the YouTube video that these strings are actually black, and that's not because I haven't changed them in like a million years. It's actually they're wrapped out. So unlike the other strings, which are like wrapped with metal, these are. Sorry, it's really hard work grabbing and putting all these instruments up. Yeah, man, I'm 25. Getting on. No, what was I saying? Yeah, so these are those are wrapped around with like black nylon tape, and they're quite similar to flat wound strings. They do have slightly more of like it's a different type of it's a slightly woodier kind of sound. It's really difficult to describe. I've recorded with them in your studio before.
Yep.
I don't know how would you describe them?
They
I'm
are
awful describing sounds.
They're similar to flat wounds, but they don't have a ring to them. So what it's like is, see a good way to describe it actually. See the sound of a Fender Rhodes. You get that sort of warm, woody sound, whereas on a Fender Strat is a more ringy sound. Now it's a totally different instrument. So imagine the low end register of a Fender Rhodes electric piano. That is what that sound reminds me of. Where the high end frequencies are more
they're still there because it's a long scale instrument, but they're less
resonant
as present. Yeah.
That's how I would describe it.
Flat tape wounds, more commonly used in styles of music like reggae and things like that, work really nicely for country and things like that too. So
I don't think it would work very well in like a indie, post-punk band. You would need something more aggressive, like a round wound.
Exactly. So it is all like that. What I said there: choose what's right for you, your instrument, and your music. So. Yeah, if you're playing punk, don't buy flats. Don't put flats on your P bass. Get some rounds on there.
I've got a question that I saw once on somewhere. Do you ever boil your strings?
I've never done that, but it does work.
So is that you take the string, you've used them for like 6 months, you take them off the bass, you put them in a pot of boiling water and then boil them. And then dry them and then put them back on the bass. Is that for people that can't afford new strings, basically?
No. So, yes and no. So boiling your strings is a really good last minute fix. Say I'm going in to record and I don't have any money and bass strings are expensive, which is just the truth. They just are. It's good strings anyway.
How much, roughly? Set around wounds for a long
decent strings. So round wounds, 20 quid, 22 quid. Yeah, that's for like mid tier. I would say I wouldn't spend more than £40 on a set of strings if you can help it.
It's dearer than electric
because
guitar.
At that point, it depends on the type of string. Because at one point, they are just ripping you off.
Yeah.
But
like
around
HDMI
20
cables.
quid, so around 20 quid is enough. It's definitely shop about and try some different things. Like I bought a set of Fender flat wounds for like £13, and they were awesome. They're really good. I still have them. I sometimes put them on my P bass, and change them in and out. But I'll come to that in a minute. But yeah, so choose the right type of string. Oh, sorry, we're talking about boiling strings. That's right. Sorry. Yeah, boiling is very much like a last minute kind of thing. So I'm needing to go in to record. I don't have enough money to buy strings. So something that I can do last minute is boil them. It makes them brighter. It does clean them,
Right.
but will only really last for about 24 hours.
Oh, okay.
And I wouldn't boil them more than once.
No.
It's very much like a very last minute fix. So
like dry shampoo.
definitely an option. Yeah, exactly. Or just a little bit of Lynx before you leave the house.
Yep.
It's good for like meeting up with somebody for a wee while, but like for the whole day or for the rest of your life, don't do that. It's a bad idea. Exactly the same as that. Yeah. Never. So changing strings. It's a little bit different from changing guitar strings. I believe that guitarists change their strings like.
Basically, as soon as you've put on your last E string, you've got to start changing your first E string again.
Yeah.
They rust as soon as you put them on the flipping instrument.
So my general rule of thumb for me is roughly around every 3 to 4 months. Depends how much I'm gigging. Obviously not gigging a lot right now, so I don't need to change my strings for a long time. I'm still playing them, so I suppose that does make a difference. But I'm playing them in my house, where I'm not sweating my balls off and playing really hard all the time. So it totally depends. If you're gigging a lot and you're going to lots of places and you're playing rounds, this is more specifically for round wound strings. Change them every 3 to 4 months. With things like flats, you can they can kind of keep them on until they start unwinding or they start getting rusty. Then you can change them, really.
Let me just have a look.
Because it tends.
You restrung this Hofner. When was that? Like, that was over a year ago.
Yeah, maybe over a year ago.
2 years ago. It was 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Right. I haven't changed these strings in that entire time, and there's not a drop of rust on them, and they sound as good, if not better, than the day they went on. That's flat.
Well, that's the thing. They will sound. They sound warm. They age really nicely compared to round wound strings. Round wounds will just get flat and sad and a bit So yeah, it totally depends. And you can with flats and things like that. If you feel like changing them out for example, I have my P bass strung with tape wounds at the moment. I still have my old Fender flat wounds, and if I feel like this gig that I'm playing could do with those flat wounds, I'll just restring it with the flat wounds and I'll play it with the flat wounds.
Yep.
And there you go, sorted. So yeah, that's strings. Please buy strings, bass players.
Yeah. If you're going into the studio and you come in and your bass has rusty strings, just turn around and get in your car and drive to a music shop and buy some strings and then come back and record. Because I ain't opening the door for you.
Exactly. It's like you only have to change them every 3-4 months. Although to be fair, I do change them right before I go into the studio as well.
Right.
So if I'm like recording and I know I'm using rounds, I will change the strings like straight up. I'll just change them, because I want them to sound as fresh as I want the bass to sound as fresh as possible.
Yep.
On recording,
Makes sense.
So, cool. So next thing that I think is very important that people sort of pass up is setting up your bass. This is something that I just learned a lot about just through. Nobody taught me any of this. I just had to look it all up myself. So there's a lot of things you can do yourself before taking it into a shop to make sure your bass sounds as good as possible. So thing number 1, I'll show you on the P bass because it's probably the easiest one. One of the things you can do is a lot of your setup will come from, if you're on YouTube, you'll be able to see that, your bridge, right? So a couple of things you can do with your bridge. Thing number one is set up the radius of your bridge to match the radius of your fretboard. So what I mean by that is that your fretboard has a slight curvature, very, very slight. Some instruments more than others, and that's just something that comes from, it's just something that's been inherited from like back in the day. Oop, my camera has fallen down again. Oopsie, sorry. Right, there we go. That's a bit better. So yeah, that's just something that's been inherited from back in the day, from like double basses and string instruments from that time. If you actually have a look at a double bass, the fretboard is totally, it's like a big old hill, right? And that's just something that's just sort of, it's just come along with it, right? It's not as extreme on a bass guitar or a guitar for that matter, but it's still present, it's still there. So that's one thing you can change, is just adjust the height of the wee saddly bits right there of your,
so it is the same distance
guitar
on each string.
No, yeah. So
Distance
it
from
matches
the
the radius of your fretboard. So it's got little legs that you can adjust with an Allen key, so you can set up the height of them and just play about with that and try and match it as best as possible. Just a rough estimate. Just eyeball it. So that's thing number one. Thing number two that you can do with your bridge is obviously set the height of your string. So you can check that by basically, this will affect the action. So you can check that by getting a capo. I know, right? Crazy. You get a capo, you stick it on the first fret, bang, like that, and then with one of your fingers, you fret the 16th fret, and then you basically just check the space in between your... No, this isn't to check your actions, this is to check the relief of your neck. So, so basically you're looking at the space in between the neck and your E string, right? And you kind of want enough of a space, roughly. I wrote down here 2p coin, but that's absolutely rubbish. Basically, you want to be able to fit some kind of like credit card or business card down there, and it should be quite snug, right? So you obviously won't be able to see that, listeners, but like I'm sticking it in
behind the strings,
round about like the 5th fret, and it's just sliding in, right? I'm not having to force it in, it's just sliding right in. So that's something to check, that's to check whether your neck is basically bananing out like that, or if it's going too far back. So you can adjust the truss rod to move and change the relief of your neck. That's if you're feeling brave.
Right.
Because truss rods, generally, I wouldn't play about with those unless you really know what you're doing.
I saw a Squire jazz bass once. There was a guy who came in with a Squire jazz bass, and it not only did it banana, it also corkscrewed. So it was it was like trying to see, like, if you look at the end of my hand, it was like that.
Oh,
you see on YouTube, the whole thing was like it was like a Twizzler.
It was warped.
It was totally warped.
That sucks.
This was an example. I think it was like a Japanese thing. It was basically
that makes me even more sad, because they're good instruments as well.
It was a lump of plywood, basically. It was just dreadful. I don't know. I think someone dropped it. Had dropped it, and it's just completely warped the fretboard. So, in that case,
at that point, it's just completely. It's not salvageable.
If you wanna take the neck off it, it's a Fender, so you can unbolt the neck and buy a new neck if you really want to, or just buy a new instrument.
Yeah, it's probably cheaper at that point than buying a new neck. But yeah, so that's a couple of things you can do. You can also set the intonation, right? So we talked about that really briefly in like a really early episode, ages and ages and ages ago. But basically what you do is you tune up your E string and then you fret on the 12th fret and you play your E. And basically what you want to look for is that E still bang on in tune, right?
Yeah.
And if it's not, if it's sharp, you make the string a little longer, right? So you can do all of this with like tools you have in the house. You just need a screwdriver. And bass guitars come with like all the Allen keys that you need for all the different parts, right? So no excuses, right? They've thought about this, right?
Yeah.
So you can just use a screwdriver on the bridge to basically lengthen the length of the string, tune your E string back up again, play it, check the 12th fret, and you basically want to get it so like when you play on the 12th fret, it's your E natural, like no fretting, and then on the 12th fret, they're basically both exactly the same, bang on in tune, no issues. And then yeah, so those are like really, really basic things you can do.
That last one is the single biggest problem I see every single time a bassist comes in, is the instrument is never in tune with itself. So you tune the guitar, the open E, the open A, the open D, and the open G, and it's all in tune. And then as soon as you put your finger down in the fretboard, it's out of tune. And that kind of stuff can be sorted at home. And you get some people who go, "Oh, I didn't know you could even do that. I didn't even know that was a thing."
Why do you think? Yeah, I know. It's
like changing the oil in your car. It's crucial.
It is crucial. There's another thing I forgot about, but do you remember last time we were talking about straps? I think you were talking about setting up your toms at different heights and things like that, and it was like the fashion to like play like Lars Ulrich
back
and
in the 80s,
have your toms way up here back in the 80s exactly. So with setting up your strap,
right.
Give me a second. I'm just going to show you. There's two ways you can do it. The best way, and this is actually a tip that I got from, do you know the band Mr. Big? Oh,
nope.
Goodness sake.
Nope, I don't know
I'm having
that band.
all sorts of issues. So it's like, what's his name? Name of the guitarist? Paul Gilbert and Billy Sheehan and those guys.
I know them.
Yeah. So a really good tip that Billy Sheehan gives you is set your strap up while you're sitting down, right? So you want your strap to be nice and tight and secure while you're sitting down, right? So then when you stand up, your bass guitar is basically at the exact same level that you had it when you were sitting down, nice and comfortable to play.
Okay.
Right? So it's generally a good rule of thumb to sort of follow, right? Don't have your bass guitar all the way up here. If it works for you, it works for you. I see no benefit to this.
See, what I'm seeing right now, I'm thinking because of my drummer brain, your wrist has got a very awkward. Yeah, you do not want that, because that just causes so many problems with your wrist.
Whereas if I've got it down to sitting level, it's got less of a drastic
bend
arc. It's more or bend. It's slightly more natural. The way that your wrist is supposed to bend, I guess. So there's that. The other thing, having it too high up, I don't see the point of. I do see the point in having your guitar a little lower, is if you're doing a lot of, if you're picking a lot. So this is actually, what's his name? D.D. Ramone from the Ramones. If you've seen pictures of him playing bass guitar, he has his bass down basically like past his crotch.
Yeah, it's like knees.
stupidly low down. But the reason for that is that it's punk music. It's downstrokes, constantly all the time, and there's a tendency if you're sitting your bass up here to involve your arm. So what he was doing, it's genius actually when you think about it, he was basically making it so his arm was completely extended, so the only thing that he could use was his wrist.
Yeah, yeah.
So then he could downstroke for days, no problem, right? So again, totally depends on it depends on the kind of music you're playing. Generally, I would go for the Billy Sheehan, set up your strap while you're sitting down. You won't go wrong. That's a really good, like, middle of the road kind of, like, setup. And you don't look like a total idiot either. I feel no shade thrown to bass players that actually enjoy playing like this. If it works for you, it works for you. Well. But I just don't understand it. So yeah. So that's a little bit about setting up your bass. However, there is another element to bass playing, and that is amps and pedals. So I have a couple of things to say about them. First of all, I kind of wrote these in a really weird order, but I should have had this one here at the start. First, should you buy a head, like an amp head and a cabinet, or should you buy a combo? And the thing is that I'm going to give a really not helpful answer at all. It depends. With a head and a cab, you're generally like spending a little less money, and you can get more powerful, louder options with a head and a cab. However, it is more things to carry around, but because we live in the 21st century, you can get smaller, compact heads, like the one that I have, the TC Electronic, the Pt.2, which is a 250 watt solid state amp, and it rocks. It's really good.
You can stick it in your bass case.
So yeah, mate. I used to stick it in my backpack,
right,
with my laptop to go to uni.
Yeah, it's tiny.
Every day.
It's like it's
absolutely tiny.
It's only just a little bit bigger than a DI box.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, yeah, it's crazy. So there's that. With a combo, they're a bit heavier, they're a bit bulkier. They're good to have in the house, and they're a good starting option. But generally, if you're going to be serious about bass playing, just get a head and get a cab. And again, there's suggestions there on our website.
Yeah, go to www.levelupyourband.com and you can scroll down and there'll be a little sign up option for free downloadables. We're going to make some lists of stuff, just suggestions. We've already got one up as of yesterday of recording this, of our recommended gear. So you can become a member on levelupyourband.com for free and get some free downloadables and PDFs that we will release over the next however long, indefinitely, hopefully. So yeah, make sure you do that.
So you can actually have a look at some of the gear that I use. Is there, but there's some good combos that you can buy. There's some really nice, like the Orange Crush 25. It's a pretty decent.
Yeah.
Is it 25 or is it 50? Or 30. Well, the Orange Crush amps are a pretty good place to start. Anything by Gallion Kruger, just have a look, try things out. But I think if you're going to get serious, it's probably better just to get a head and a cap.
Right. What about
tube or solid
board? What about like just a pedal board?
Oh, pedal board. Yeah.
Like a Helix or Kemper and all that stuff.
It depends on how much you're using it, because the thing is that it could be an absolute waste of money if you're literally just buying it to then go through a PA and you're using the tuner on it.
Oh no.
It's practically pointless.
£2,000 tuner.
Yeah, so it totally depends on what you're using. If you're literally just using if you're just needing like a distortion and a tuner, just buy a distortion pedal and a tuner, and that's it. That's all you'll need. personally, I've found that I've started using more things. It's gotten to the point where I bought individual pedals, but it's now getting to the point where I would like to have more options, So at that point, you're probably better off getting a multi-effects.
Yeah.
But by that, I don't mean get a crappy like Boss,
Yeah.
£100 multi-effects. Spend some money, don't bother with an amp. Just spend some money and get yourself like a really, really nice, multi-effects with like modeling amps in it, and use that, because at this point they're 99.9999%, is close to like the real thing.
Yep.
So
I'm thinking there's three popular ones that people buy, and they do guitar and bass. So number one, which is kind of a household name, is the Axe Effects for guitar and bass, and they have like amp modeling, cab modeling. They have all the effects you could ever want. You can hook up wah pedals to it, you name it. Another one that one I have actually in the studio here is the Kemper, which is the 600. I think it's a 600 watt power amp on it, so you can hook up a 4x12 cab and power it, and it's got all the same stuff as the Axe Effects, except it sounds better. And then you've got the slightly cheaper alternative, which is the Line 6 Helix, which is still an amazing piece of gear.
It's really, really good. That'll run you around actually the cost of an amp and a cab. So right. I'm having a look here. There's an option here with like a volume pedal, which is $399.
That's the Line 6,
which is the Line 6 pod.
Right. Yep. I've seen a couple of people come in with Helixes.
You also have the Line 6 Helix.
Serious bit of kit.
Yeah. No, they're really good too. So that's another option for you.
Cool.
Let me go back to my thing. So totally up to, it depends on what you're actually using, what you're playing.
Yep.
And then you have I was actually tube amps or solid state amps. This is more of like a guitar issue than a bass issue. 99% of bass amps are solid state because tube amps for basses are hilarious. They're hilariously huge and hilariously heavy.
Yeah. I had one. You remember it, the Laney sort of.
Yeah.
It was a hybrid. It had a solid state preamp thing and a tube as well. And of course, as tube amps tend to do, they blow up. Like you need to replace the tubes on it. And of course, the tubes blew up. And I just ended up using the preamp and just the solid state component and just never bothered to replace it. And then the whole thing died, and then I replaced it with Trace Elliott solid state, which sounds excellent. It's fine.
It sounds excellent. It sounds brilliant.
It's lighter.
So, and it's so simple as well. Yeah. It's literally two knobs.
Yeah.
Gain, volume.
Yeah,
that's it.
EQ. That's it.
So solid state. Always solid state. Yeah. Don't if somebody's trying to sell you a tube amp, a tube bass amp, don't be a tube. Just buy solid
don't
state.
be a tube. Yep. I can't wait to hear the guitar version of this conversation with tube and guitarists get really, really precious with their tube amps. I love winding them up. It's personal pleasure, pastime.
Sorry, before I finish amps, setting up your amp, very important. So a lot of people don't tell you this, but and I've seen some like whacked out, like crazy like amp settings on gigs, and I'm like, mate, have you even actually thought about that? So a really good place to start with choosing your amp settings, and you've just bought a new amp and you don't know how it sounds or how it works. Start at 12 o'clock, and by that I mean with all the dials pointing up to what would be 12 o'clock, just straight up. Just have your whole thing flat with the exception of volume, obviously, and maybe gain, and then from there play a little bit and tweak what you need, and it'll be like, so for example, my bass amp, the way I have it set for most basses is I have the middle at 12 o'clock, I have the bass slightly rolled off, and I have the treble slightly boosted up.
Right.
Because sometimes more bass isn't what you need.
Yeah, so you've got a ramp, an upward ramp towards the higher frequencies.
Yep.
So guitarists tend to have a smiley face. So it's like they boost the low and they boost the treble and they leave the mids alone. Sometimes they scoop the mids if you're into kind of gent, kind of metal. Scoop the mids. So big smiley face.
It's generally a good place to start. I do tweak it depending on the style of music, but I've found that setting that I came up with works for just about everything for me.
Right. Yeah.
So just play about with that and see what works for you.
Yeah.
Playing and practicing. So if you've never played bass before, you're starting. A couple of things to think about. Your number one friend is going to be scales and arpeggios, specifically arpeggios.
Okay, I'm kidding.
I know. It is boring. Here's the thing. It is boring to start off with, but especially arpeggios. Learn your arpeggios. Learn different types of arpeggios. So not just learn different extensions. Like your major nines. Oh. And what else could you do? You could do minor nines as well. Dominant 7/9s. Things like that, and go up and down, different keys, and do that slowly with a metronome. And the thing is that before you know it, you'll have gained like a ridiculous amount of mastery over the instrument, and you'll get to know your fretboard really well. And scales as well.
You should be able to know what every single note on your bass guitar is. If someone can say
on each
asks
string,
you play a C sharp on the D string, you should just go now, and you should be able to just know exactly where that is immediately without even hesitating.
Yep.
That's the first thing you should really, if you really want to take it seriously. I was speaking to someone about this. It was a bass guitarist. I can't remember if it was him or someone he knew of. Their dad said, I want you to go and learn every single note and know where it is on that fretboard, from the lowest note to the highest note in the whole instrument. I want you to learn every single, what note is that? Where can play an A flat on the G string now, and just be able to just know immediately like that. Because once you know where all that is and you learn all the theory, you know where to put that's that note there, that's that note there. You know where to place your fingers. It's so much easier knowing where everything is. And you can just learn it like times tables. It's just there.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, it's one of these instruments that's it's very, I guess it's modular in a sense. Like you just have to learn like a couple of shapes.
Yep.
And just learn how to apply them in different places, and bang, you got it.
Yep.
And you really, like, I cannot stress this enough, like music theory, in some sense, this is probably like one of the hardest instruments to learn out of a band. Like, music theory is so important as a bass player. You really need to understand it and get to know it really well.
Yep.
Learn your chords and really learn how to understand
bass guitar's got a really hard job, because it doesn't get said enough, actually, because the thing that links the drums to the rest of the band is the bass guitar. Like, the drums and the rest of the band wouldn't make sense unless there was a bass guitarist there joining them together. So the bass, not only does the bass have to think of the bottom end of the guitar, the bass is the bottom end of the guitarist, right? The bassist's job is to give a foundation and a root to what the guitarist, the chords are playing, right? And it simultaneously hooking up rhythmically with what the drummer is playing with his right foot on the kick drum, and making sure that rhythmically and on the frequency spectrum, everything is all glued together. It's such an important job, the bass guitar, and it doesn't get said enough.
No, thank you. I feel a lot better now.
No, genuinely.
Finally, somebody's shedding a light on how difficult my job is. No, it's so, honestly, man, it's so important. And the thing is that the more you learn about music theory, like the more it's just, it's fascinating. You'll totally nerd out about it. It's one of those things, So there's that. The eternal question, fingers or pick. I say just do both in equal measure, because it's going to set you apart from the rest of the rest of the bass players that you'll see. If you can do both, and you'll be more versatile, you'll be able to play different things as well. Not to say that you can't play jazz with a pick, because you can. There's a bass player, I can't remember his name, but he plays an acoustic fretless bass guitar with a rubber pick, and he sounds incredible. Mm-hmm. So it's totally cool to play with a pick. And a lot of my favorite players
are sound engineer
play with picks.
What do you call it? Side to this. If you are on stage and you're playing a song and you need more bass, or your sound engineer is asking in this recording studio, I just need a little bit more bassiness, and then you go to your amp and you turn your bass up, and it just starts to sound honky, and it's like, no, it's not what I want.
Yeah.
If you're playing with a plectrum, put it down for a second and try fingerstyle, and 9 times out of 10 that cures all those low end frequency problems. You will get 10 times as much bass by playing with your fingers than you will with a pick.
Yeah, exactly. The thing that a pick gets you is a more aggressive attack, and that's about it. But it's good to be able to, well, there's more other things that you could do. It just changes your playing style completely, but it's in a good way. So my advice is do both.
Learn both.
If you're learning bass guitar, learn how to play as many different styles as possible. Mm-hmm. Learn disco bass lines. Learn some punk music. Even if you don't play punk, even if you're like, I play jazz, why do I need to learn how to play punk music? Just learn it. You'll learn something.
Yeah, totally.
You might pick up on something you didn't know. Learn some metal riffs, some metal lines. Even, and I'm not saying this is a joke, learn some country music, because playing over and over and over again in time is really, like, it's harder than people think it is.
Yeah,
it's
really is.
It's really, really, really important. So like look at everything and play everything, and just try out little bits here and there, and you'll find that it'll influence your playing style, and you'll find things like, oh, cool, like those octave bass lines and like disco parts, like that's so cool, I'm gonna start implementing more of that in my playing, or whatever, or like, oh, that aggressive, like, punk bass playing, I'm gonna do more of that. You'll find something, so I say, just go out there and try and learn and pick up from as many different styles as possible. And the last thing, this about playing, practicing, this is to do with scales and arpeggios again. Just practice with a metronome. And even better, if you have one, practice with a drum machine, because it's probably, it's a little bit more interesting than practicing with a metronome, and it's closer to the real thing, right? Yep. Because you'll be really listening out for that one, and then that, you'll be listening out for the 2 and the 4 on the snare, and that's what you'll be really grooving with. So Yeah, do all your exercises and your arpeggios and your scales, make them interesting, and set them up with a drum machine. Different styles as well. I have a really cool CD that I got from I've got it all on MP3 tracks now that I got from my bass teacher, and it's basically a drum metronome. So it's an actual drummer in a studio playing to a click, but playing different styles and different grooves. So like playing like 5/4 like straight jazz with at like 60 beats per minute. And then at like 180, and then like 250 beats per minute, and like things like that. And it's can be really interesting to practice things and our scales and arpeggios and whatever, and listening to the drums and trying to lock in with the drums. So really important. Very last thing, I do get a bit sad when bass players just don't know any bass players, or they'll be like there'll be one bass player that they know, and that's it. So this is my personal recommendation of bass players to listen to, and a lot of these bass players you will have listened to without realizing. First one being James Jamerson. He is basically in every single Motown track you can think of. I Heard It Through the Grapevine, he's on that. Ain't No Mountain High Enough, he's on that. Like, he was just the go-to bass player at the time, session bass player, and he played on all those tracks, and his playing is incredible. And on top of that, the thing that's really frustrating, he didn't even use two fingers like that. He just used one little finger, and that's how he played all his bass lines. So, and the bass lines that he's playing are absolutely ridiculous. So, James Jamerson, really good start. Mike Dirnt from Green Day, absolutely phenomenal bass player. Like one of my personal favorites. I don't think people realize like how good he is until you're a bass player and you're actually listening to Green Day, and you're forgetting about what's happening in the drums. You're forgetting about what's happening in guitar. You're just listening to him play, and you're like, whoa, all of that's going on underneath the background. It's crazy. Yeah. So Mike Dirnt's a really good guy to listen to. Carol Kay played on a lot of like music from like the early like mid 60s as well. So Simon and Garfunkel, Bridge Under Troubled Water, like a bridge over troubled water. Sorry. She played on that entire album. Played bass on Pet Sounds as well, Beach Boys, and it was just a bit of she was a bit of a badass at the time as well, because it was the 60s and she was a woman, and music was basically it was a man's world. So she basically just like stepped up and was just like, I'm just gonna play bass, you guys, and was just a bit of a badass. So if you're a woman and you're listening to this and you're like, you want a female role model to look up to, Carol Kay, absolute badass, so good. Chris Squire from Yes, just if you're not listening to any prog rock, go and listen to Yes. It's my favorite prog rock band of all time. John Taylor from Duran Duran, just exceptional bass player, just really, really good. Jaco Pastorius obviously goes without saying. Yep. If you're a bass player and you haven't heard of Jaco Pastorius, what's wrong with you? Henrik Linder, he's a Swedish bass player from Sweden. He's a Swedish bass player from Sweden. No, he plays in a band called Dirty Loops, and he's just phenomenal. He's really, really good. He's insane. Just listen to him. It's just really, really inspiring stuff. Adam Neely as well, YouTube bass player. He does a lot of really cool videos just about music in general, but he's also an absolute beast. Joe Dart from Wolfpack. He's also really good. Duncan Lyle, he's a Scottish bass player, but he's kind of like in the same kind of scene that we're in, the sort of trad kind of scene. But he's an awesome bass player. He's great. He's really good. So look him up on Spotify and check some of his stuff out. He's an awesome composer as well. Cliff Burton, he was actually one of my main inspirations when I started getting into bass. I'd never heard of Metallica before, and this guy was just like, oh, you need to watch like Cliff Burton play because he's insane. Cliff Burton being the very first bass player that Metallica ever had. He tragically like passed away after the band's like third album. After they recorded that, they were like on tour in Sweden, and yeah, the bus basically crashed, and I won't go into the details. Like, just look it up. It's really quite sad. But Cliff Burton was an absolute badass on the bass. So listen to him. Listen to the first 3 Metallica albums because they're exceptional. After that, it just all goes downhill. Don't know what to say. It just does, in my opinion. Metallica fans, like, come at me. I don't care. You know, Paul McCartney goes without saying again, like, just exceptional. Really, like, reinvented bass playing completely.
Yep.
You know, because he was taking it from being more of like an accompaniment, like, you know, sticking to the root kind of thing, and because he was a guitarist, he was playing more melodic kind of bass lines and kind of led the bass in that kind of path. And yeah, just really, really awesome. And then just to finish up, Steve Harris from Iron Maiden, just an absolute tank of a bass player. And then Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Flea's just, never mind, he's just an excellent musician.
Yep.
He's a really accomplished like jazz trumpet player as well.
Really?
Yeah, he's just really good. Yeah, and just listen to him play and listen to him talk about music as well, because he has some really interesting things to say and interesting philosophies. And yeah, I think that's about all I have to say about playing bass in general.
I want to learn bass now.
Well, like after you were telling me about drums, I was just like, man, I need to get my drum playing up to scratch.
Same.
I'm always the go-to for testing testing the mic for testing the drums for recording, and it's just
that's
I know enough to get the job done.
Yeah, that's all you need really. If you're sound checking drums,
basic
just
rock beat.
Someone just play like Boots and Cats, and everyone knows that one, right? Boots and Cats and Boots and Cats and
Boots and Cats and bum 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 bada bada bum. There you go. That's all you need.
Yeah, that's it. Every rock song ever.
One day I'll turn up to the studio and I'll be sound checking drums for you, and you'll be like, what the
I need to quit my job. Cool. So
I'll take up bass instead.
That pretty much that's a good lump of information. That's probably the longest podcast we've ever done. It's like I'm looking at my time, and that's like an hour and a half. So I'll probably have to cut some things.
There'll be a lot of umming and erring from me, for sure. So
cool.
There'll be enough. There'll be lots to cut.
So
out.
the next on the list, hopefully, will be electric guitar in general. Hopefully, and we'll bring on a special guest to talk about guitar, because none of us are fully qualified on the ways of the guitar.
No, I'm just like, it has 6 strings. That's it.
Yeah, it's very similar to bass, like on the outside, but there's so much more the guitar has. When you think about like amps is a much bigger topic with guitar than it is with bass, as we will find out next week. So as always, if you enjoy our wee podcast, please give us a like, a share, a subscribe, a review, a rating, just everything, because
something positive, please.
Some
kind of engagement,
because it helps get the podcast out to other people who might want to listen to it, and it'll come up in their recommended, as I've heard that it has been doing. So people have been, watching certain types of things or listening to certain types of podcasts, and then our little podcast gets recommended to them because they like that sort of thing. So it takes lots of people doing that, and if you just take a wee 2 seconds out of your time just to like or give us a 5-star review, that would be so cool. And if you want to become a Level Up Your Band member, you can go to our website, www.levelupyourband.com, and you can sign up for free, and we will be sending you access to free downloads of PDFs. Things like, at the moment, we have up our recommended affordable gear list. So this covers many, many different things. It will be updated just through time. We've got like a base, like foundation one up just now, and I'm probably going to add some stuff to that. It'll change over the course of time, because that's just how life works. But it'll always be there. So if you sign into your account, the latest version will always be there, and you can download it and have a little look. If you're browsing for guitar amps and you're not sure what to get, you can have a wee look at our sheet and see what we suggest, like drumsticks, drum heads, you name it.
Bass strings.
Yeah, just thought it would be a good idea just for folks to just have a little reference guide to just help. Like, what kind of microphone should I buy? What kind of cable should I buy? Blah, blah, blah. So just a little resource. And we're going to have lots more resources coming on the way. And if you've got any suggestions, any things you're uncertain about, give us a shout. You can reach us at Facebook or YouTube or Instagram or our own website. You can email us. We're everywhere. Carrier pigeon. You can send a courier.
Probably. Yeah.
Here, got something I'm supposed to deliver. Anyway.
Dead drops, whatever.
So, once again, hope you're all doing well and have a fantastic week, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Right. Bye.